Dumbledore wasn't always the wise, old, and occasionally quirky headmaster we came to love. Sure, we saw his brilliance in the movies, but his journey to the top of Hogwarts is packed with untold stories and some seriously hardcore history. From crafting legendary magical items to making choices that would haunt him forever, let's dive into 10 fascinating things Dumbledore did before he became headmaster. And if you're enjoying this dive into Dumbledore's untold past, it would mean a ton to us if you hit that subscribe button. It's the best way to help us bring you more Harry Potter news, theories, and stories to life. And don't forget to leave a like, it lets us know we're on the right track. Got a topic you'd love us to explore next? Drop it in the comments, we'd love to hear from you. The very start of the Harry Potter saga, which kicked off a legendary legacy, began with Professor Dumbledore using his famous deluminator to darken Privet Drive. This wasn't just any dramatic entrance, it was the prelude to leaving baby Harry on the Dursleys' doorstep, an event that came to be the starting point of an unforgettable journey for everyone involved. The deluminator, or as the books describe it, it seemed to be a silver cigarette lighter. He flicked it open, held it up in the air, and clicked it. The nearest street lamp went out with a little pop. He clicked it again, the next lamp flickered into darkness. 12 times he clicked the put-outer until the only lights left on the whole street were 2 tiny pinpricks in the distance, which were the eyes of the cat watching him. This tiny handy gadget allowed the bearded professor to literally snuff out any light source in its vicinity. It was a one-of-a-kind magical invention that was both mysterious and practical. Because of course, that's just how Dumbledore rolled. Dumbledore was its only known inventor and keeper until his passing. After that, the little, unassuming silver lighter that held all sorts of magical powers was entrusted to Ron Weasley. Despite how wise and kind Dumbledore appears throughout the Harry Potter series, his childhood was far from accommodating. Certain events like losing his sister, falling out with his brother, and forming a bond with Gellert Grindelwald shaped his deep skepticism towards the dark arts, and understandably so. Dumbledore knew exactly what Grindelwald was capable of and seemed to be quietly waiting for the right moment to prepare himself for an inevitable confrontation. That moment arrived when he was appointed as the Defense Against the Dark Arts instructor for a brief tenure. This role not only allowed him to sharpen his own defensive skills, but also gave him the chance to teach his students how to counter the dark arts, just in case Grindelwald made good on his promises. And as we all know, he eventually did. But let's not forget that Dumbledore wasn't hired as DADA just for the job title. He was actually the only known threat to 2 of the most feared dark wizards in history, Grindelwald and Voldemort. Both were so terrified of facing him that they never had the guts to challenge him directly. He was basically the thorn in their side that not only gave them endless headaches, but also turned into their permanent roadblock. Even the people who publicly disliked Dumbledore acknowledged the power he had in curbing the dark arts. "Oh, but halt!" Dumbledore says. "Subscribe, or no chocolate frogs for you!" Dumbledore's stint as the Defense Against the Dark Arts DADA teacher was rather brief. Not long after, he was moved to teach Transfiguration at Hogwarts, and for a very good reason. Even as a student, Dumbledore was basically the gifted child of Transfiguration. His skill was so advanced that he'd already published multiple theses and papers on various topics before even finishing his studies. His NEWT examiner, Griselda Marchbanks, was left so impressed by his Transfiguration exams that she was quoted saying, "Examined Dumbledore personally in Transfiguration and Charms when he did NEWTs. Did things with a wand I'd never seen before." Naturally, such wizardry didn't go unnoticed, and he was soon given the role of Transfiguration teacher at Hogwarts. From there, he climbed the ranks unnaturally quickly and became head of the Transfiguration department, and then, you guessed it, eventual headmaster. His work in trans-species transfiguration caught the attention of the magical world, and he eventually became a daily writer and columnist for Transfiguration Today. Being the greatest wizard of all time, Transfiguration wasn't the only thing Dumbledore was good at. In fact, while he was most professionally known for Transfiguration, he actually earned most of his accolades for being an exceptionally active alchemist. But here's the crazy part. Nicholas Flamel, one of the greatest alchemists in history, known for making the Philosopher's Stone and an elixir of life that basically rendered him immortal, was not only a mentor to Dumbledore, but also one of his closest friends. These two worked together for decades, even teaming up to bring down Grindelwald. Flamel considered Dumbledore such a close friend that, despite being centuries old and having a bit of a mystical reputation, he let Dumbledore use his home as a safe house when things got too dangerous during the Grindelwald showdown. Together, they made waves in the world of alchemy, which ultimately earned Dumbledore the gold medal for groundbreaking contribution to the International Alchemical Conference. You know, no big deal. Just another award in an absolutely exhaustive list of other awards in Dumbledore's not-so-boring profession. Enjoying the video? Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. Albus Dumbledore was many things. He was a prodigy, a renowned transfiguration expert, a great alchemist. He was also a pretty big deal in the world of magical research. He contributed to a ton of studies, but one area where he truly stood out was his work on the 12 uses of dragon's blood. Although some accounts beg to differ, Dumbledore was given full credit for researching the 12 uses of dragon's blood. Now, you might be thinking, what's so special about dragon's blood? Well, it's not just for fancy potions or as a rare ingredient in obscure magical recipes. Dumbledore unlocked its full potential and showed that it could be used for a wide range of magical purposes. One of the most practical uses, it's an incredibly effective cleaner. Yeah, you heard me right. Apparently, a dragon's blood is perfect for wiping away all kinds of magical messes. Dumbledore's research earned him recognition in the wizarding world for discovering how versatile dragon's blood really was, and his findings are still cited in magical studies today. Oh, and thankfully, cleaning isn't the only thing it's good at. Albus Dumbledore's many talents weren't just limited to magic. He also dabbled in a little acting, directing, and stage play. Unfortunately, his involvement in Hogwarts' production of The Fountain of Fair Fortune wasn't exactly one for the history books, unless you count disasters. While Dumbledore wasn't the play's director, he was tasked with setting up the stage for this live adaptation of the beloved fairy tale from The Tales of Beedle the Bard. It was the first time Hogwarts attempted to put on the play, and unsurprisingly, the last until 1988. Dumbledore recounts his involvement and subsequent failure in the play in detail in his notes. Apparently, two of the actors in the play ended up fighting each other on stage because the actor playing the male lead had suddenly decided he wasn't in love with the main female lead anymore. The students playing Amata and Sir Luckless had been boyfriend and girlfriend until 1 hour before the curtain rose, at which point Sir Luckless transferred his affections to Asher. What followed was utter mayhem. The actor playing Amata didn't take kindly to the sudden turn of events, leading to a full-on magical duel with Asha mid-performance. To make matters worse, a charm went haywire and set part of the stage on fire, escalating the drama to catastrophic levels. Safe to say, not every task this legendary wizard took part in turned out to be triumph. Sometimes, even Dumbledore had to deal with magical soap operas. Literally. There were many traits Albus Dumbledore was known for: being kind, open-minded, and generally seeing the best in people. But even before Voldemort became, well, Voldemort, Dumbledore had a gut feeling that something wasn't right about that boy. Dumbledore first met Tom Riddle as a kid, causing trouble at an orphanage. At the time, Dumbledore was tasked with recruiting new students for Hogwarts, and Tom was on the list. However, the moment Dumbledore met him, he realized this wasn't your average mischievous kid. Beneath the surface, Riddle radiated something far, far darker. Hatred, cruelty, and an unnerving emptiness. The orphanage's caretaker didn't hold back, recounting Riddle's long list of horrifying antics, tormenting other children, hurting animals, and displaying an unsettling lack of empathy. But if that wasn't enough, Tom himself pretty much sealed the deal by bragging to Dumbledore about being a parcel mouth, a rare ability that didn't exactly scream future model citizen now. What set Dumbledore apart, though, was that he wasn't fooled by Riddle's charm. While others were quick to praise Riddle's talents, Dumbledore kept his distance. Years later, when a former headmaster was ready to appoint Riddle as the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, Dumbledore put his foot down hard. He knew giving Riddle that position was like playing with fire. It was dangerous and would yield inexplicably harmful results for everyone involved. Yet, despite all of this, Dumbledore still held out hope for Riddle's redemption. He blamed himself for failing to guide the boy and for the man he eventually became. It's a regret he carried deeply, as he once said to Voldemort, "The time is long gone when I could frighten you with a burning wardrobe and force you to make repayment for your crimes. But I wish I could, Tom. I wish I could." Even Dumbledore, with all his wisdom, couldn't save everyone. Some battles, it seems, are lost before they begin. But also, why fight Voldemort when you can just hit subscribe? Way easier, I promise. Tom Riddle's cruelty wasn't limited to physical torture or a thirst for world domination. He had a knack for using emotions and affection to manipulate everyone around him. One of the worst things he ever did was nearly ruining the life of one of the kindest characters in the entire series. Before Hagrid became Hogwarts gamekeeper, he was a promising student with a heart of gold who almost got expelled for being kind. During the infamous string of petrifications at Hogwarts, which tragically led to Myrtle Warren's death, Hagrid found himself framed for the entire mess. His crime was caring for a young acromantula named Aragog, who he had kept in the dungeons. Riddle discovered Hagrid's secret and used it to pin the blame on him, despite the fact that the real culprit behind the attacks was Riddle himself. While everyone involved was pretty quick to believe Hagrid was the culprit, Dumbledore wasn't fooled for a second. He knew Hagrid's love for magical creatures was genuine and not malicious. Despite Headmaster Dippet's insistence on expelling Hagrid, Dumbledore fought tirelessly to make sure he stayed at Hogwarts. Though Hagrid couldn't complete his studies, Dumbledore's efforts led to his staying on school grounds and eventual appointment as the school's gamekeeper. It's just another example of how Dumbledore's unwavering faith and belief in the good of others helped soften the blow for a major character. Dumbledore's childhood wasn't exactly all unicorns and rainbows. In fact, it was a series of tragedies that could have turned anyone else who wasn't him into a villain. His sister Ariana was traumatized by a group of muggles to the point of instability. His father ended up in Azkaban for avenging her, and later, his mother was accidentally killed during one of Ariana's magical outbursts. After his parents' death, Dumbledore was left to care for his younger siblings and forced to put his dreams on hold. He was bitter and resentful and viewed his family as the reason his bright future had been stolen. It was during this rough patch that he met Gellert Grindelwald, his best friend and soulmate. Dumbledore was immediately captivated by Grindelwald's charisma and vision, so much so that he failed to notice the darkness brewing inside of him. At his lowest, Dumbledore became an easy target for Grindelwald's grand and morally questionable plans for world domination. What's shocking is that the kind, wise Dumbledore we know today was, at one point, totally on board with these plans. Eventually, though, reality hit hard. Grindelwald's true nature came to light after a heated altercation led to Ariana's death, a tragedy that finally revealed his lover's nature to him and changed him for decades to come. It was the beginning of a lifelong journey to redeem himself, and perhaps the reason he became so determined to always do what was right. Dumbledore's near descent into evil wasn't even the most surprising part of his highly decorated life. Let's face it, every kind of goodness has its own little bit of darkness lurking within. That's just life. What truly stood out was how Dumbledore overcame his inner demons. He sacrificed his ambitions and even took down the person he deeply cared for just so he could redeem himself. In many ways, Dumbledore was a superhero long before he became Hogwarts headmaster. He avoided confronting Grindelwald for as long as he could. He wasn't all that excited to come face to face with Grindelwald's reality. He was scared that the man he deeply cared for would actively confess to intentionally killing his sister, and he just couldn't stand for that. But when Grindelwald's crimes reached a breaking point, Dumbledore had no choice but to step in. On November 2nd, 1945, the inevitable happened. The legendary duel between Albus Dumbledore and Gellert Grindelwald was finally happening. To this day, it's remembered as the greatest battle in the history of the wizarding world. Official records don't offer much information about the duel, but eyewitnesses vividly recall the sheer terror they felt as the two wizards clashed. It wasn't just a fight, it was a moment that shook the magical world to its core. And that's the thing about Albus Dumbledore. He wasn't just a legendary wizard with unmatched talents and quirky habits. Sure, he had a ton of feats that deserved to be remembered forever, but that's not what he was truly known for. He was human, with flaws, regrets, and a heart that always tried to do what was right. And maybe that's why we love him so much. Not because he was perfect, but because he wasn't. I'll catch you next time.